is up, everyone, and welcome back to the channel. I hope everyone is having a good day and a good week thus far. So we are back at it again with our next horror movie review. And as I've mentioned this in the last horror movie review we did earlier today. I'm going to probably mention it for the foreseeable future, at least for the next several movie reviews, just until everyone, is aware of, kind of my position and how I'm going to be structuring these going forward. I am, as you can see from the last movie review we did today and the current one now, I am doing a mix of, as I stated before, older, semi-older horror films with new films. So I may do, one day we may do, 2 or 3 older, semi-older horror films. One day we might do 2 or 3 new ones, or do a mix of both. And the reason I'm doing that is because, again, I feel that with so many people being fairly new to the horror genre over the last couple of years, some of the mid to semi-older older films may not be aware of them, may not have seen them, and would like to see them. They might be into some of the subgenres they enjoy. Also, one, as I already mentioned, do a bit of a mix between the two. And then when it comes to the newer films, I think many people may not have seen some of the newer films, especially if they've only come out in the last month or so. Some people tend to wait for them to come out on streaming or VOD, and then they tend to watch them. So I'm trying to be respectful of the fact that I'm not going to do a movie review on a film that had just come out like a week or two ago. So I am trying to wait at least 3 to 4 weeks or so since the movie's initial release before doing a review on a film. I figured that might be enough time to do a spoiler movie review. So again, just to set the context as to why you might be seeing some of these films that aren't brand new, just trying to keep it mixed up as far as a variety of stuff for people who may not be as exposed to some of these films as some others who might have been watching horror for many years. So with that said, our review for today's video, we're going to be focusing on a Paramount Plus original from 2022 called Significant Other. Now, this is starring Maika Monroe and Jake Lacy. This film has been deemed a horror sci-fi mystery. Now, if you enjoy alien films, extraterrestrial films, UFO type films, then I believe that this one you may like. It doesn't delve very deep into, you see the UFOs flying around, you see the traditional aliens with like the big eyes, the large heads, like the very skinny arms, long fingers, all that like traditional stuff we would typically think about when you think UFOs and aliens. It's not going to delve that deep into it, but it does play on the fact that this has to do with extraterrestrial or aliens. So just want to kind of put that out there that it's not that traditional sense, but it's still within the same subgenre. So I do feel though this was more of a sci-fi mystery versus horror, but I can see and sense as I watched this film the horror aspects in it. So I can again see why it would fall within the horror concept. Now, even though this leans more towards on the sci-fi mystery aspect, it does get into the horror piece when we start seeing some of the kills, and there are some kills here. They're not overly brutal, they're not overly gory. I think they're nicely done kills, and again, I think that's what adds the horror aspect to it. So we're going to jump into the details, so be warned, we will be discussing spoilers from this point forward. Now, for this particular film, there are several twists, and I think unexpected twists. So I'm going to be covering this film at a very high level. I'm going to carry us about 3/4 of the way through the film, and then I'm going to leave the last quarter of the film as a mystery for those of you who have not seen it to then go watch it. If you don't have, and again, this is a Paramount Plus original. If you don't have Paramount Plus, I'm sure you can sign up for a 7-day free trial and be able to view it that way. And in my opinion, Paramount Plus doesn't have a ton of content. It does have some good content here and there that makes it somewhat worth the price of having. I pay to have it, obviously, but again, if you can get a 7-day free trial, I would suggest do that. See if there's anything out there you like, and if anything during that 7-day free trial, watch Significant Other, especially if you're a horror fan. I think you'll enjoy it. So, all right. So as I mentioned, spoilers from this point forward. So this film opens with us seeing a red star falling from the sky, which is soon followed by a very eerie predator alien type sound. So if you've ever seen like the original, Predator films or Alien films, when you know that you're about ready to be exposed to them, you hear like that eerie sound that they make. This is that same type of eerie sound that we hear, right? So as soon as that star falls, we are then taken to like the wooded area, and you hear this sound that it's making as it's making its way through the woods. And whatever this thing is, it comes across a deer that is staying there, and then next thing you know, it finds its way behind the deer. As it's getting ready to attack, the screen goes black, and you hear, for those of you who might be sensitive to this stuff, you do hear what you would imagine or would be the deer, screeching as it's being killed. So again, if you are sensitive to that type of stuff, you don't see anything as far as it happening. But again, if you're sensitive to the sound of things like that, then fast forward, I guess. But that's the only time we hear of an animal being killed. But I will say later on, we do come across this deer again, and I will explain that once we get to that point. So we are then immediately introduced to our two main characters for this film, Ruth and Harry, who have been they have been together for 6 years. That is discussed at the very beginning of this film as we are introduced to their characters. So they are on their way to backpack and camp in the Pacific Northwest wilderness. And upon arriving at the trail entrance, Ruth is very hesitant to get out of the car. You can tell she is very reserved about getting out of the car. And even though Harry's trying to explain to her, hey, you'll be fine, there's nothing to worry about, she's still very reluctant. She has a fear of the unknown, and she also suffers from panic attacks. But then yet again, Harry manages to convince her everything's gonna be okay. Everything will be okay, because he also briefly mentions, if you can, surf and do those things, going on a backpack hike and camping is nothing. But again, it really plays into the fact of when she has the sense of unknown of what's going to happen or unknown of her surroundings is where she starts to, I don't want to say break down, but has a very hard time and starts to almost like hardcore introvert herself. So, and there will be another one of, we'll see this happen again as they move on through the story. So yet again, though, Harry manages to get her to agree, let's move forward, let's go on the camp, let's get our stuff. So the film does briefly explore the couple's dynamic here, enough to serve the purpose for the film. They don't delve too deep into her character, his character, as far as their past, their upbringing, all that comes with it. Just enough, again, to understand what her issues are, what type of person he is, and how they are as a couple. So as we have an idea of how Ruth is, Harry comes across as charming, but a bit awkward at the same time. Like he doesn't know really how to act, almost kind of goofy in a way. So, and again, the purpose behind Harry playing this trip was not just to get Ruth to get out of like her comfort zone, but his plan is also to propose to her. But we come to find out, and this is something that we find out that they have discussed in the past, is that she's less eager to settle down as in getting married. And that's based off the fact of her parents' divorce had such an impact on her, and which also then feeds into her fact of the unknown, her panic attacks, just constantly feeling on edge. So in addition to the challenges she currently has, like I said, Ruth becomes unnerved as she starts to become aware of something being ominous, right? So they're walking down the trail, and she almost has this feeling like something or someone is following her, but there's nothing there. I mean, there's a couple times they're walking on the trail. Harry's walking ahead of her, and she turns to look around, and again, as if you have that feeling of something is there, but you just don't see it. So she has that happen to her a couple of times leading into their first night camping. So in that first night, she gets up in the middle of the night to use the restroom. And while she's out, of course, you can imagine you're in the middle of the wilderness. There is no light. Even there's not enough light for the stars to shine down. So she grabs this little lantern, but it's like a battery powered one. And as she's walking away from the tent, she can see a bit in the shadows that same deer that we saw earlier in the film. So she sees this deer, doesn't know what to make of it. Harry comes up behind her, scares her, and then the deer is gone. And then she's like, well, she makes it seem like she saw this deer as if the deer was going to do something, as if the deer was what was following her. And he brushes it off as no big deal. So we get to the next morning, and this is where Harry's going to surprise her. He brings her to the ledge of the mountain, and this is literally just a ledge and an immediate drop off right into the ocean. And he really brought her there to say, hey, look at this view, because she loves the ocean, she used to surf. And this is where he starts to propose to her. As soon as he does, this results in Ruth having a panic attack in response. Ultimately, then when she takes her medicine, kind of gathers herself, doesn't say no outright, but pretty much is telling Harry no. And he doesn't take it too well, walks away. And then she obviously can see the distraught that it's caused him. But later on they have a conversation in response to how she responded. Tells Harry, you knew as far as what I didn't want. Marriage was never part of this. I do love you, but we've talked about this before. And then he gets kind of like this, I don't want to say resentment, but kind of lashes out a bit. You don't want to face anything. You're afraid because of how your parents, all this and that. So she feels the fact that they love each other. That should be enough, because she then goes on to say that, well, people change. You may eventually change. I may eventually change, and we may not love that version of whoever we become. Which I think is a side note. I think it's just a pretty shitty way to look at it, but that's just my opinion. So during this first 30 minutes, it's a slow burn, but things are a bit slow, and it's really, again, to set the stage of what's to come, because after this point of this proposal of that night, we come to the next morning, is when things start to take a turn, and this is where a lot of twists come into play, a lot of unexpected twists that I didn't see coming, and I thought were nicely placed. And again, that was everything that we saw before, was allow us to see the dynamics of both Harry and Ruth, along with them as a couple, so individually and then together. So after the failed proposal, we see Harry becomes, again, standoffish, and the mysterious atmosphere of the woods starts to pick up, where we get jump scares starting to be folded into the film, because now they're both avoiding each other. She's going off on walks by herself. He's doing the same thing, because that next morning he's already gone. He left a note saying, went for a walk to clear my head, and that was it. So she decides to do the same, and yet now she comes across that same deer. And now when she does come across this deer is now split open, and it's covered in this residue or substance that she doesn't know what it is. And then next thing you know, Harry shows up, finds her, and he doesn't know what it is. They go back to camp, and they have this book that they were reading in the car on their way up, as far as how to identify certain flowers, plants. And then they come across this, and he comes across a page and say, oh, it's some type of animal wart. That's probably what it was. No big deal. So later on, Ruth takes another solo walk. She stumbles across a cave where she finds an odd substance kind of pooled into the cave, not knowing what it is. And as soon as she turns around, she screams in terror, but we don't know what she's screaming at. We're not as the audience, we're not exposed to it. But as soon as that scene ends, we see her, and she is after that, she's completely different. It's as if she's a completely different person. She's subdued, she's calm, very soft spoken. Again, completely different person. Harry finds her, and again brings her back to the campsite, and they go to bed. And as they're going to bed, we see like a time lapse where Ruth is laying there, and we see her eyes open, and she's literally awake the entire night, does not go to sleep. So the next morning they get up. Ruth tells Harry, hey, I've changed my mind about marriage. I think I made the wrong decision. I would like you to propose to me again. So Harry's getting ready to do it right there, and she's like, no, I want to go back to the same spot from the day before. So he's like, great. So they go back up to that spot and they're right there on the ledge again. He proposes to her. She says yes. He stands up. She attacks him and within seconds pushes him right off the ledge. And we see him fall and just smack right down onto a boulder. As soon as she looks over the ledge and sees that he's down there, she takes off running through the woods right up into the, she's running up into the point she passes out, falling and hitting her head on a rock, knocks her out. And then again, we see another time lapse. And we're actually just, the camera is just sitting there watching her. And you're watching the time lapse as you see her breathing going faster, the leaves, the wind moving faster, and then it eventually just slows down to real time, where another couple finds her. Now here we take the second, I would say the next big major twist in the film, at least that I found, and to be completely unexpected. So upon being taken back to their campsite, Ruth does not say much and takes focus on a hunting knife that the man is using to cut up some food for them. So while he's doing that, she's sitting there and the wife is trying to get Ruth to talk, trying to get her open. Like, you know, did you know where you're at? Are you out here alone? You know, we want to get you some help. And she doesn't say much. The wife thinking, okay, well, it's still somewhat daylight. I'm going to try and go get a signal with my cell phone. She's talking to the husband. Ruth takes the opportunity at that point to get up, grab the knife, and hold it out against them. Now they're both now worried that Ruth is going to kill them. Now at this point, Ruth takes notice of what is behind them, and it's Harry. So the remainder of this film now will take a few more surprising turns and twists and moves us a bit into the body horror subgenre, and Ruth having to try and outwit Harry and escape the woods with her life. So I'm not going to cover the last 1/4 of the film because I think it would be worth. I feel like we've spoiled it right up to the point where I don't want to spoil the last quarter of the film on how these two. Ruth and Harry now interact and how she's trying to continually escape and what she does. And again, the additional 2 twists that will come and explain how Harry has survived and then what eventually happens with Ruth. So in my opinion, the film attempts to show the audience that this is truly it's about the monsters we battle within ourselves and outward, and that you never really know anyone, including yourself. I think Maika Monroe has been, in my opinion, making a name for herself in the horror genre for the last several years. And I think this is one of those films that's in the genre that has been overlooked as far as her body of work. I mean, when you think about some of the other stuff that she's done, you really don't hear about significant other when you think Maika Monroe and what horror films she's been in. I mean, I could probably go to 4 or 5 different people, and this wouldn't be the first probably 3 films, maybe even 5 films that they mention with her in it when it comes to horror. So again, I think it's one of those films that she has. I think she has really been able to showcase the fact that she plays well within the genre, and she knows how to represent horror films, how to represent the character she's portraying. So and I also like the fact that the film does not follow the typical horror rules and tries to stand out amongst many others in this subgenre of sci-fi horror, and again, leaning a bit into the body horror. It's only 84 minutes long, so it's easy to keep up with this film. It keeps you guessing. I think the jump scares that are put in there nicely. They're not forced in. The twists and surprises, again, I didn't see them coming. I thought they were well put in, well developed. I always enjoy original new ideas especially when it comes to horror films. So for this one, I'm going to give it a solid 4. I did enjoy it. It really had to do with the surprise twists and turns as far as what was happening with the characters. Between that really sold me on it, and the fact that, again, it felt original, and both Maika was able to play the character superbly. So giving it a solid 4, and I could be a little bit biased because I'm a big fan of Maika's work, both in horror and outside of horror. I've mentioned this in another film when we did a previous movie review of hers that she was in with Bill Skarsgård. She's in another film called God is a Bullet, I believe, and it's not a horror film, but I would highly recommend you see that film. It is a hard film to watch. There's some subject matter that is very hard to watch, but overall, I think it's a great film. as far as the story and as far as the character she played. So again, we're going to give Significant Other a solid 4 out of 5. And that's going to do it for our movie review. Again, I don't want to spoil that last quarter of the film. I think it's highly worth checking out for yourself to see how it ends. I just don't want to spoil that. So drop a comment in the comment section and let us know if you've seen the film, if you haven't seen the film. If you did see it, what did you think? Give us a rating. If you haven't seen it, like I said, if you have Paramount Plus, check it out. If you don't have Paramount Plus, get the 7-day free trial and check it out. I think it's worth it. I mean, again, it's free for 7 days. What do you have to lose? And there's other content on there you can check out. And if you haven't done so already, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Otherwise, we'll see you at the next one. Peace.